the expenditures were for the total program and broken down by funds. Of course, WDPF took a portion of it, and of course, the Water Rights Program took a portion of it. Again, I laid that out in the email that was sent out.
I think there might be some confusion also about the pay letter versus the 2% that was budgeted.
Do you want to
The pay
clarify
letter,
that?
the pay letter was much more unexpected, and that had to do with non-represented employees, so managerial employees that aren't covered by bargaining unit contracts. And so that was not something that was clearly visible on the horizon and wasn't taken into account. If that's how I understood the comments, as how come this was unexpected when we had budgeted for an anticipated 2% for staff cost increases. So that's the difference between those two, is we expected the 2% increases for represented employees, but the pay letter that was discussed was not expected to nearly the same degree.
Yeah, I suspect also we'll have some cost of compliance and appropriate forum conversations, I'm sure, from Board Member Tamdotic, but for the rest of us. So let's wait on that and get through our speakers, unless, okay, that just seems prudent. Carl Borden, Associate Counsel, California Farm Bureau Federation.
It's not Carl.
You're going to take his spot? I have you at
Yeah,
the...
you have.
Are you going to be both, or is the...
No.
Okay.
I'm not an attorney. Carl had to leave.
Oh, I see, okay.
So I'm going to
Take
do
the
my
spot, that's
best
fine.
imitation. Clearly, we've got, I'm sorry, Danny Merkley with California Farm Bureau Federation. Thank you, Chair Marcus, members. Clearly, we have some different opinions about this fee, and we don't think it's appropriate. We think the California Superior Court made that abundantly clear on the 2003-2004 fee. We understand that's in appeal, but at this time we think that this is not a proper fee, and it's inappropriate to be moving forward at this time. So that's
Great. Thank you, Mr. Merkley. Appreciate that the matter is a subject of ongoing litigation and will be resolved that way. I understand the importance of saying that on the record. Next, Hugo Conti, Los Osos Townhomes, President.
Thank you, panel. My name is Hugo Conti. I'm here because I'm the current board president of Los Osos Townhomes. And specifically, my expertise is I'm a professional engineer licensed in the state of California, and I design hydraulic systems. What I'm commenting on is the fee schedule for the community septic systems in all townhomes. At present, every single townhome, regardless of how many units
I'm sorry, Mr. That is the next item on the agenda. This one is the water rights fees, for water rights, not for the, there are two different fee items on the agenda.
Okay. Then
So-
I get to present the next one?
Yes,
Because this
absolutely.
addresses your fees. Okay.
Right. Hold that. Thank you, sorry. Oh, and then the next would be Roger Holmes, also from Los Osos. I'm presuming that's from the same situation. Okay. We will hold you for the next one. Mr. Philip Williams from Westlands Water District.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Afternoon,
members
Mr.
of the
Williams.
board. My name is Philip Williams. I'm the Deputy General Counsel at Westlands Water District. First of all, we'd like to start by incorporating by reference. We've submitted written comments and also incorporating by reference yearly comments that we've been submitting since 2003 regarding the fee schedule. I told people I was working with at headquarters that I was going to go speak before the state board today and on the fee increase, and they said, "What are you going to say?" And I said, "I'm going to tell them it's not right." And they all chuckled and patted me on the back and told me to go on my way. But I was in the restroom just earlier, and you have a big sign in the restroom that says, "We are in a drought." And I thought that was pretty telling, because the reality is that we are in a drought. Westlands Water District, because of that drought, as well as other reasons, has a 0% allocation. No water is being delivered to Westlands Water District, and yet we pay over $700,000 a year in fees for water that we don't get to support an organization that does a great job and a great public service to the state, but we get no water from it. Earlier in the summer, when we asked this board to help us protect the water that we are currently living off of, transfer and stored water, we couldn't do it. Lack of information. Now we are being asked to pay more money. Given the fact that we pay about $700,000 a year, the increase from the proposed option from Mr. Ceccarelli will manifest itself in about just over $70,000 in additional fees. In the middle of a drought, in the context of the State Water Board not protecting stored and transfer water passing through the Delta. I want to be clear that our position is not meant to be on, regarding the employee compensation, that it's no commentary on the value of the service of the employees that work at the State Water Board. It certainly is not. Mr. Ceccarelli and I, much to his chagrin, have spoken probably more times than he would like in the past month as I try to wrap my head around this, and I appreciate his robust participation and help. But the reality is the salary increases are, as you said, Madam Chair, outside of the hands of this board. But what I would submit to you is that what you do with that is not. And as you may think, you may believe that the hard decision may be instituting a fee increase. I would argue that that is actually the easy decision. It's pushing off that fee increase on to, in part, the hardworking farmers in Westlands Water District and the hardworking people across this state. Regarding, just quickly, the policy of trying to keep your general rights fund around 10%, we can appreciate why you may do that, why you may want to do that. Mr. Ceccarelli and I, in our discussions, for a while we were going to be able to arrive at no fee increase next year because you received a significant application fee. I would submit to you that the chances are possible that they may happen again and allow this board to be in a position where you don't have to increase fees in order to maintain that 10% fund. There's just a lot we don't know. What we do know is it's not raining. So, pending your questions, ma'am.
Thank you. Questions? Okay. Thanks very
Thank
much, Mr. Williams. Next, Laura Brown from California Citrus Mutual.
Madam Chair, members of the board, good morning. Thank you. My name is
Sheila.
Laura Brown, Director of Government Affairs for California Citrus Mutual. In addition to working with individual growers, I also work closely with our packing houses, and I've been learning a lot about their fee schedules, and I've been surprised at the increments at which that they have been increasing. So I actually had them submit a few copies of their bills in the past years. Going back 2002, there's a $400 permit fee. 2007, it went up to above $4,000. 2008 went up another $2,000 to over $6,000. 2011, over $8,000.
Excuse me, what fee are you talking about?
I'm sorry, I'm talking about the waste discharge permit fee.
Yeah, I think that's
for-
the next
another
item
Is
too,
it?
Ms. Brown. I'm sorry.
Oh,
It's not the
okay.
water, the water rights fees is separate.
Sorry about that.
Sorry, you'll be back. That's fine. All right. Questions, options from my colleagues? Suspect there'll be some thoughts.
Well, Board Member Dodig and I have been talking quite a bit about the next item, and we were prepared to talk about or make a suggestion about a stakeholder process, maybe a more robust stakeholder process going forward. I think that's most definitely needed on the next item, but this
it
item
applies
would
to this
benefit
item.
as well.
Yeah.
So, should we go ahead
Yeah,
on that?
go ahead.
All right. So I think that just in the interest of time, I've been spending a lot of time on this with agricultural stakeholders in particular, and it's been pointed out that last year and this year, frustration about not really knowing what goes into these decisions. And I keep hearing this constant theme of they're looking for more information, more transparency, more time, more dialogue. and comparing it, and I think we'll, hear from some that are planning on speaking, maybe comparing our process to other agencies like CDFA and the Air Resources Board. So what Board Member Dodick and I have been talking about is that it would be helpful for us to be more specific this year as compared to last year. Last year we did suggest further stakeholder discussions, but this time around I would feel more comfortable. I believe Board Member Dodick also would feel more comfortable if we could have more specific guidelines in going forward on a stakeholder process. Several meetings, not just one, more time where possible, understanding the constraints that we have, and maybe looking into what is done at some of the other agencies where no one's ever happy about fees, but
No, we're not even happy about it.
right, but where maybe they can at least understand it and accept it a little bit more. So rather than going into specifics, I think that it would be more appropriate to have staff report back, maybe the next meeting or the meeting after, on a process that they would be engaging the stakeholders with going forward.
Let me expand upon that. I certainly agree with what Board Member Diadamo has said. I would strongly advise, encourage staff to reach out to the stakeholder on both types of fees, and solicit some suggestions and prepare a recommended process for engaging the stakeholders for the next year's fees discussion. And whether it is the next meeting or not, I'm not sure that they can do it in time, but definitely by the end of the year, before the governor's budget is released and before this new rounds of sessions start, I would like to have a better understanding of what that stakeholder engagement process would be, and that would be both for the water rights as well as the water quality fees that will be coming before us.
All right. You want to talk about that a bit? I'll have to confess to being disappointed in that, not with staff. Staff's great, but I'm disappointed, given the discussion we had last year, that we appear to be not that much further along in terms of being able to engage stakeholders. I understand there's a tight window and we're not allowed to talk about certain things, but there is a dovetailing with some of the cost of compliance conversations we're having. Again, you don't want to create too many mixed up processes, but I would also like a more concrete set of steps that people could count on for the next year, because it's by the time it happens, it becomes hard to influence for folks, or to even come up with more constructive solutions in a timely fashion that we can take notice of and munch on through the process. So it helps us to have stakeholders engaged early and talking to us as well through the process.
So we will, I'm sorry.
And as Board Member Diadamo mentioned, I think other board members will advise that other departments like Food and Ag and the Air Resources Board tend to engage their stakeholders earlier in the process of fees discussion, and they are under the same restraints, I guess, or conditions that we are with respect to the confidentiality of the budget process. So, I think taking the time to find out from them and from the stakeholders what the differences are in the various processes, and if there is something we can do to engage earlier in the process would be helpful.
Or even have materials that are more accessible to folks.
So we will contact the fee stakeholders and solicit information and recommendations from them about what process they would like to see for the next year. We'll also consult with Food and Ag and the Air Board and other agencies that assess fees and document what their process is for moving forward with fees, and we'll bring you back a proposal as to how we will do our fee outreach in next year, and we'll bring it to the first December board meeting, if that's okay with the board members.
If you could do it earlier, that would be fine too.
We will try to do it earlier, but we'll do it by at least the first December
Okay.
board meeting.
That seems fair. Okay, great. Great.
If there's no further discussion, I will move the item Were there some proposed changes with the change sheet? Nope, there was no change sheet. Nope, no change sheets.
The change sheet had to do with the narrative in our staff presentation.
Okay.
Okay.
So moved.
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Carries. Thank you. Now on to item number 8, and again, my thank you. I know many of you are waiting for that item. Am I in the wrong numbers? Okay, 9. 8. That's what I said.
They're 20, 37.
Yes, item 8 are the water quality
Right, but I think we
fees.
should keep going. I would like to continue going because I don't want people to have to wait. I hope you're not all too hungry or you have little snack bars.
And
Because I know people, I had a request, folks would like to get home and we've already delayed folks, so.
And before staff begins its presentation, I'd like to make a proposals that after the staff finish its presentation, I and perhaps Board Member Diadamo would like to propose some changes, and perhaps that might facilitate the speedy commenting process that will follow. So I would encourage those of you who submitted blue cards to speak on the water quality fees item to, well, listen to the staff presentation and think about the changes that Board Member Diadamo and I will suggest and revise your comments accordingly.
Yes, Mr. Cavatello.
I just wanted to point out that a number of the folks who are here for the dairy item have gone to lunch, and they're happy to come back right now. So we can do that. But it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if you decided to go ahead and take your lunch break. So I'm just.
Well, let
pointing
me
that-
see. Okay, I'm sorry. I was responding
I think some folks
to.
interpreted the fact that you were holding item 7 ahead was that you wanted to go ahead and have lunch, and that you.
Oh, no, it's just because there weren't very many cards.
Yeah.
That
Well,
was where the
and-
call was.
And I did get some messages that some folks got up at 4:30 this morning and they need to get back, so just want to make
Yeah,
sure.
that's the trade-off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and they also haven't eaten in that time, so.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just saying, if we can go ahead and begin getting people back here, but, and you can start right now. I just wanted to let you know that a
No,
lot of folks
thank you
had
for
gone to
that. It's
lunch.
always a
So if it's more
challenge.
convenient for you to have lunch now, that wouldn't hurt too many people's feelings.
The question is, I'm looking at the other people in the back of the room. Are there people who want to keep, if you want to keep, I'm not going to do a vote, but give me a sense. If you want to keep going, raise your hand, sort of. Okay. I think we'll keep going. Apologies. Unfortunately, it means they may not hear your proposal before, but we'll. Okay, you think they're right nearby? Okay. All right. Go, staff presentation, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Marcus and board members. As you said earlier, my name is John Russell. I'm the Deputy Director of the Division of Administrative Services. With me today is Phil Wiles of the Office of Chief Counsel and David Ceccarelli of my staff. Before you today for your consideration is a resolution adopting emergency regulations, revising the core regulatory fee schedules. The agenda item in the staff report discuss in detail the proposed changes to this regulatory core fees, but I wanted to briefly discuss a few of the notable changes with you today. First, I wanted to talk a little bit about the cost drivers for this. We talked about the cost drivers for the water rights fees, but I'll go quickly through the cost drivers for some of the waste discharge permit fee, the WDPFP. Expenditures for this fiscal year are projected to increase by approximately $10.9 million. And those were due primarily for the following reasons. There was an increase in staff salaries of approximately $3.7 million. Those were the 2% previously talked about, plus the pay letter increase. There was a fund shift of the groundwater ambient monitoring and assessment program, or the GAMMA program, from expired bond money to the WDPF fund, and that was approximately $3 million. Previously, that program had been about $5 million, so we did do a little bit of a reduction in that transfer. There were increases in retirement and health care costs of approximately $2.2 million. And at about $1 million each, there was an increase in staff in the 401 certification program, and that was in response to the state auditor's recommendations that that program was understaffed. And then there was an increase in our pro rata costs and other state cost shares for a Delta program, and that again was about $1 million. Ultimately, at the end of the day, this is an accounting function. The legislature, the state board, and the regional board set the program priorities for this. And it's our job at the Division of Administrative Services to just make sure we have the ability to balance our expenditures with our revenues. A couple of the programs, I'll go through them really quickly now, but I did want to talk about a little bit about the ambient monitoring surcharge. That was for the GAMMA program and the surface water ambient monitoring program, or SWAMP. Previously, those were surcharges on top of the base fee. We've heard from numerous staff or stakeholders who indicated that they just wanted to pay one fee. And so we're proposing to roll that surcharge into the base fee, the same as we do with other redirected charges, such as enforcement, basin planning, TMDLs, healthcare, things like that. Each of those programs, SWAMP and GAMMA, will continue to be assessed against the appropriate programs. For example, SWAMP will be assessed against the surface water programs, and the GAMMA will continue to be assessed against the groundwater programs. Several commenters noted that rolling these surcharges into the base fee might result in a reduction in transparency in what they're actually paying for. And they requested that at a minimum, we at least enumerate every year what percentage of the base fee goes towards the SWAMP and the GAMMA programs, and the rationale, if there are increases, the rationale behind that. And we think that's totally appropriate. So we'll continue to do that. Two of our programs are not going to see any increase this year. And in fact, they'll be seeing a reduction in the fees: the stormwater program and the NPDS program. These reduction in fees are being implemented on a one-year basis because the budgeted expenses are anticipated to increase next year, so we're doing it on a one-year thing. And they're getting a reduction because we're anticipating collecting more revenue than is necessary for those particular programs. So stormwater is we're proposing an 8.9% reduction in the overall fee program. And for NPDS, we're proposing a 3.2% reduction. The Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, they will not see any change in their fees for this year either. And that's, again, because revenues are expected to more or less equal our expenditures. One commenter noted that in his particular coalition, though, they are expecting to see a very significant increase in the number of acres going into this program, which would cause a decrease in the per acre fee. We checked with Regional Board 5, Central Valley Region staff, where that particular coalition is located, and they indicated that they have seen a modest increase, but they haven't seen the entire increase yet that would cause us to lower our fees. And the
It should
increase,
show up for next year,
it will show up for next year, and we'll certainly take that into account. And the increase in acres in this one coalition are a little bit offset by a decrease in acres in other coalitions. And coalitions are still reporting, so we haven't entirely got the entire picture. But for the purposes of moving forward with fees, we have to set some sort of a due date and just move ahead. But we will definitely look at that for next year. Land disposal and with no tipping fee, and then land disposal with a tipping fee, both of these programs will see a little bit of increase. In the no tipping fee program, we need to generate an approximately $985,000 more in revenue to meet the expected expenditures, which is about a 9.5% increase. And in the no tipping fee part of the program, the land disposal program, we need about $363,000 in revenue, additional revenue, and that's an increase of about 10.6 to that particular program. The Rural County Representatives of California commented that in general, increasing fees tend to hurt the more rural landfills. They have less population supporting those landfills, and they also believe that on the program side, regulatory staff tend to focus their efforts on the larger urban landfills as opposed to the smaller rural landfills.
Would they like more attention?
We get that comment quite a bit. I'm paying a significant fee, but I'm not seeing the regulatory oversight that I think I should, and I don't know if they really do want more.
Question.
In the dredge and fill and the 401 certification program, there are a couple changes that we wanted to go over really quickly. It needs to generate an additional $1.2 million in revenue to meet the budget or the anticipated budget expenditures, which is an average increase of about 19.7%. And again, this is primarily due to adding new staff to the 401 certification program. We're also proposing to change the fee structure a little bit. Right now, we're only assessing an application fee, and we're proposing to go to both an application fee and an annual fee for those projects. Some of these projects are fairly large scale and they last multiple years, and assessing an annual fee will make it more equitable for some of those larger projects than just paying an application fee. The other thing that we're proposing to do in this is raising the cap on these fees from $75,000 to $90,000. Again, that increase is in alignment with the 19.7% fee increase of the program. We did get a comment letter that noted that even that increase in the cap, the commenter was unsure if we had the data behind that to support, are these projects, are the large projects really taking $90,000? Mr. Wiles has spoken extensively with that particular stakeholder, and we do agree with that. So we're going to be working with the program staff this year to do some time tracking and see how much time per project staff are really spending on these types of projects. The confined animal facilities, this is obviously going to generate, well, it did generate the most comments, and both written comments and comments from our stakeholders. Overall, there needs to be an approximately 31% increase in the fees to meet the expected expenditures. In the staff report and the board agenda item, we laid out a couple options for you to consider. One of the options is the status quo option, whereby the fee reduction for facilities that have a California Dairy Quality Assurance Plan, the fee reduction that they get for having that plan remain at 50%. The second option is for facilities certified that they have a QAP, that their fee reduction remain at 50%, but that the amount of that fee reduction be capped at $2,500. And then there's a secondary option, which I'll talk about in a minute, having to do for each of those options, rolling in the dairy waiver fees into that. We heard very strongly from the dairy industry stakeholders, overwhelmingly. In fact, one of the comment letters phrased it as unanimously that the dairy industry is in support of the first option, the status quo, that we don't impose a cap on the QAP. And the rationale included for that, which I'm sure you'll hear about in a little while, where it was, again, fairness to the dairies that have gone to that extra step to do the QAP process, and then some trust issues. The dairy waiver, 2 regions have dairy waivers. Their dairies, for the most part, aren't under waste discharge requirements, Region 1 and Region 2. There are approximately 130 dairies in Region 1, and all but 3 of those are under the waiver, and those dairies currently do not pay a fee. Again, there's several options for this. One is to charge the dairies under this waiver a fee to support staff time to work on those. And the other option is to delay that decision on whether or not to charge them a fee this year, while staff consider some of the impacts of the fee. How are we going to implement it? What is the potential for a different fee schedule for some of these, and other things that the dairies have proposed? Again, we heard from the dairy industry stakeholders, and they were, again, overwhelmingly in support of postponing that decision for a year to allow staff to better develop this proposal. Finally, we have several new fees that I want to bring up really quickly. One is the cannabis cultivation fee. As you're aware, the State Board will be implementing a pilot project for regulating cannabis cultivation activities in Regions 1 and 5, and we're setting a proposed fee schedule. And this fee is, because this is such a new program, we don't have a very good handle on what this fee should be. So we put the fees out there with, and I want to give you the heads up that they will likely change next year based on the enrollment.
Experience.
Yeah, who comes into the program. We just don't have any idea who is going to come in and enroll in this permit. And those are all based on a acres cultivated basis. The next new fee is the High-Speed Rail Authority. They're going to pay a stormwater-related non-traditional MS4 fee of approximately $150,000, and that'll be for various counties for the operation of the high-speed rail. They'll also be paying 401 certification project fees in the various counties that they construct.
Right.
The final permit, or the final fee that we have now, which is new, is a drinking water purveyor's fee. It's a statewide general NPDES permit for drinking water system discharges. I believe that's going to come to you at the second meeting in October. And if you adopt that permit, this fee will cover that. And it'll provide regulatory coverage for planned and emergency discharges of raw, potable, and treated drinking water from drinking water systems. And we're proposing to assess an annual fee based on the water system's number of service connections, with very small service connections paying a very small application fee. The issue of stakeholder involvement came up, and I'm going to play the new kid on the block card right now and ask Darren to come up and just give you a really brief update on some of the activities we did last year, since he's more familiar with them. But in general, we agree wholeheartedly that we will need to increase our stakeholder outreach and efforts this year.
As the new kid, they're very nice people, so you'll enjoy them.
So certainly I was the one last year that committed to establishing the stakeholder process. It was not forgotten. But let me kind of explain how it went, not as a form of an excuse, but to inform you as you decide on kind of how you want to go forward. So last year was about the craziest budget year you ever wanted to have. If you remember, in December, we were still writing BCPs, which was basically unheard of. I didn't even know it was really possible for us to actually be involved with the governor's office and Department of Finance at that stage, that late stage in the game. Mostly to address the governor's water action plan, which came out. You'll recognize also that we rolled immediately into a drought, and they started actually renegotiating the previous budget year's bill with SB 103 and the other items. And as kind of the budget chief, I'm also responsible for coordinating with Department of Finance and our other control agencies. I sought permission in February after the governor's budget rollout, as I had promised you, to basically have a fee stakeholder work group and to talk about that. They basically said no, that there was one budgetary process that we needed to be a part of that. They were concerned, obviously, about the moving pieces of the drought legislation that was working through the governor's water action plan and other items. As went along, I kept checking back with them if it was a good time. Of course, we got to a point in the budget process where we can't disclose what's going on as far as finance letters are going, which would be late changes that would appear in the governor's May revise. And of course, we got to a point where there was going to be a lot of changes that we would know about. And if we came out before that, it would look like, you know, we didn't know about them and we wouldn't be able to talk about them. So you run into that problem around March and May timeframe, where in April, where it becomes really kind of like we know but we can't say, and then it would really look like we're changing the game on what's going on. So then we basically did it as quick as we could. Once May revise was out, we had the fee stakeholder group basically about as quick as we could, which of course is much later than I had promised that we would have one back in early February. And yesterday we actually had staff prepare kind of a redo, which I think is a very interesting tale of what we would have said at the different times, presuming we would have been able to have a fee stakeholder meeting starting in like February, which was my proposal and what I and staff were working towards if we'd been able to secure. And you can see that the information kept changing on us. This would have been how everybody's fees would have looked if we would have had those stakeholder meetings at those different times. And it's, as you can see, quite different as things went along. Now again, last year was an exceptional year. It was a year different than any other I did in my tenure as admin chief for the board. It may not repeat itself and we may calm down a bit, but certainly it was an unjustful year. And so I want you to know we tried to meet the commitment that I had made, but were basically stymied in several different ways. And so as you contemplate how to definitely address the stakeholders' concerns, and I legit, fully understand their point that we've got these conflicts going on. So.
Thank you, that's helpful. I think too, part of the thinking, and this goes to the proposal, though I suspect that board members D'Adamo and Dodek have more to it, is part of the thinking is how do you figure out how to tee up the conversations in relationship that acknowledge that this might happen versus it just being about the numbers on the page and the accounting for it. So part of what you're also doing is being in some kind of a relationship and gaining better comprehension or ability to articulate what it is we do and how this process may work. So it's also instructive. It doesn't mean you can't have, if you wait until you have all the info, then you can never have as many conversations. It's not that different from, not to draw in a completely different arena, but as we prepare for the drought ops earlier this year, last year we did have this back and forth where people didn't want to have a conversation because they didn't know what the numbers were going to be because it took 3 weeks to get the projections. Well, that didn't mean you couldn't have conversations all along. It's just you can't have the exact numbers all along. So that's what's instructive in this, because the conversations are about more than the math. So, but this is helpful.
I would just like to say, I mean, Darren, you've been terrific, and I have never heard a complaint about your interaction with the stakeholders. I think that we just, we have some responsibility as well. I don't think we were clear enough last time. Now we're very clear. We have a process. We want staff to come back with a process, and I think that it's going to be better this time next year because we're much more clear about our expectations.
Well, and we will also get advice on where those expectations aren't realistic, and we'll have to make some choices. Great. Can I ask one question before we go to the comments? One of the things, just, I mean, it's very interesting how folks align on it, and clearly we're not raising as many fees to the level that we did last year, which is just interesting from a host of, oh, can you keep that up? How much, and I asked this before, and I'm sorry, I'm just not, I don't have the paper with me, my notes. How much of that 31% increase in the confined animal feeding operations is the carryover that we asked you to carry over last year because we just didn't want to make the rise as steep as it was going to be? How much is new this year and how much is the carryover?
The carryover is about half, so about
About half.
16.5%, or about, excuse me, about 15.5% would be the carryover from last year, which was about $525,000. And then the addition is just a new cost into the program for this year for cost of operations.
Right.
I'm sorry, if we would have fully increased fees last year, this year they would have been in line with, well, about a 15% increase that they would need for this year.
Thanks.
So before
Yeah, go.
jumping in, I have a suggestion. And this might be a little unusual because, of course, this is a public hearing and an opportunity to hear from the public. But in the interest of time and everyone's growling bellies, I'm going to just provide a recommendation in going forward that I think may address a number of the concerns. So
No,
if you're
go
good
ahead.
with that, I'll go ahead, and I believe Board Member Dodek might have something to say as well. And I'd like to
Now, let me
focus.
just But it may make some folks may agree, some folks may disagree, but, so we won't decide anything till we hear from
Exactly.
people, but you'll, okay.
Yep,
good.
exactly.
Okay,
I just want to throw my opinion out there.
Okay.
And see if it sticks. So this is focusing on the dairy issue in particular. So first of all, I do appreciate the most recent exchange about reminding folks that we did not have a fee increase last year for dairies. And
We had a little one.
yeah,
We did.
Yeah,
We had-
a little
cut it
one.
in
Yeah,
half.
I'm sorry. It was much smaller than what was proposed.
Right.
And this year, we're looking at some relief for irrigated lands. So there is flexibility in the program to a certain extent, but it's a zero-sum game, shifting things around. So for dairies, what I would like to suggest, if we look at the different options that are proposed, in light of the fact that most dairy stakeholders have a very intense reaction to some of the options that we've proposed. In particular, I believe the one that staff is recommending, which would be 2A. And looking at 2A, for the largest dairies, it would result in a 90% increase. And I just think that that's untenable. That's not to say that we shouldn't put a cap on the QAP at some point, but that adjustment would probably need to be a slow ramp up, and it would also need to involve a lot of stakeholder input from the regions to find out, what sort of savings is involved. Are we overshooting the cost savings when we look at this adjustment for the QAP? And I just think that the best way to move forward for the time being, in light of the fact that we're going to have a more robust stakeholder process, would be to go with option 1A. And if we go with option 1A, we're still looking at some pretty steep increases, but something that is much more manageable than these higher fees. Now, recognizing that if we were to go with a cap on the QAP, the smaller dairies would have a much smaller increase. And that is something that we should be looking at. But again, I don't think we should just guess at what it should be. I think that this really calls for more information, more stakeholder input. And I especially appreciate the comments. There's a letter that we have by Dr. Deanne Myers from UC Davis. We're trying to incentivize people from taking advantage of education and doing what they can through these programs. And what I think we don't want to do is have a disincentive, and I don't know what that tipping point is. And I don't think we should guess. So I would like to recommend that we go forward with option 1A. And I believe that option 1A is the status quo also with respect to the waiver. And there may have been some issues with communication, in particular in Region 1, but I think there are a number of dairymen out there that felt that they were not going to have fees associated with this program. So in light of the fact that this is an emergency reg and we're moving quickly, I think it'd be better to work with the region to have some outreach, communication about what we're doing and bringing them into the program, and also giving folks in that waiver program an opportunity to explore a dairy quality incentive program opportunity.
Let me build upon that. I certainly would endorse Board Member Diodamo's recommendation of option 1A with one provision and one clarification. Option 1A would maintain the existing fee structure without shifting the waiver into fees, without a cap on the QAP fee. It's kind of hard to say, but recognizing though that would result in a 33% fee increase across the board for all dairies. So I just want to make sure that is clear. And then so that was a clarification. And the provision would be building on what we discussed earlier about a stakeholder process. I also want to have a a process focused on dairies and dairies fees.
I was going to suggest that.
I, in addition to what Board Member Diadamo said about taking the time to do outreach and work with the stakeholders and the fee payers, I would hope that in this next year, we would develop a better understanding of working through the QAP program of the value and benefits of those services, understanding, how that contributes and perhaps reduces the burden on regional water board activities in those areas, and have a better understanding of that value, as well as understanding of the cost for the dairies to participate in that effort, and the cost of the program in delivering the education and outreach efforts that they do. I think that sort of information is necessary in order to properly design that ramp up with respect to a cap, if we are to consider one in the future. And then also, I would like for us to have this year to really look at, the regulation of the confined animal facilities themselves. I mean, there are the differences, I think, between what Region 5 does and Region 1. In one of my meetings with the dairy folks, I, was given an example of, for example, the waiver in Region 1 versus the WDR. And I, at this time, don't have an understanding of what the various workloads are in terms of, applying, administering, and enforcing the waiver versus the WDR. And again, what are the costs of compliance associated with the waiver versus the WDR? And what does that mean? How does that translate into the fee structure that we might be considering? And, finally, I would love, though I think Michael will probably give me, Mr. Lawford may give me a dirty lawyer look at this. Well, I know that this is not a fee for service, structure that we have. I still think, as a matter of, the conservative fiscal person that I am, that we do need to better understand how how resources are being allocated, how they're being used, and ask ourselves the questions: have we, sufficiently maximized the use of those resources? So, in the same way that we did the independent analysis for the NPDS program, I would like to do one, at least this year, focusing on WDRs, if not WDR, definitely the CAFO programs, the Confined Animal Facilities Program, just again, to get that external independent look at this effort. And obviously, it's an effort that I would strongly encourage that we engage the stakeholders in and not just do it internally as we have done for the NPDS audit, but we will fix that. So, and I guess in summary, I certainly agree and endorse Board Member Diadamo's suggestions, again, with that clarification and with the additional provisions, with looking at specifically what we can do in the next year to better understand the situation, so that we might make a more informed decision next year.
Did it just go off?
It's on. Green light's on.
So,
In case, I'm done.
No, that's a suggestion. I'd love to go to the public comment. I think that's very helpful. I appreciate you both diving in. I was going to suggest that we do a more focused look on the dairy program as well, in part just because I'm interested, but also just to use it as something of a case study. I just from my perspective, I'd want to withhold judgment on what program to audit until we actually can look at across a suite and see what staff recommend in a formal sense. That may be it. I also think you brought up a point that's fair, which is in the stakeholder engagement, it's not just about the administrative staff talking about the numbers. It's got to be involved with the people who are actually substantively working on the program in general. So thanks for teeing that up before we get to comments. And with that, I'd like to move to the speaker cards. Unless you want to say something before we start?
I just, want to support this dialogue. When you look at this table and you look at, the fee tables, there is an abruptness to some of this, sort of, these are sharp changes. And, this type of program is going to, in the long run, work better if we were more smooth. So these comments we heard from the board members, I support in terms of ideas like ramp up and, and just trying to be and hear about the impacts to the stakeholders, because these are abrupt changes that doesn't seem like a smooth running system as much as we could maybe endeavor to achieve. Thanks.
Mr. Conti, come on down. Or come on back.
Thank you. Again, my name is Hugo Conti, and I represent Los Osos Townhomes because I'm the current board president. My expertise is I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of California, and I specifically work on hydraulic systems of a water nature. My concern is the fee structure for HOAs. From everything I've checked, you have one set fee regardless of the number of units in the HOA. For instance, I'm being charged for my owners $80.83, and I have 12 units in my complex. If you have a 100-unit complex, they're being charged $9.70 per unit. There needs to be established a unit fee and then adjust that for each HOA complex. The HOA complex is a $10.8 billion industry in the state of California. You are not assessing the higher complex